Hi, hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel. Today let's learn about the famous Italian writer Luigi Pirandello. Luigi Pirandello, 1867-1936. An Italian dramatist and a novelist. He was born in Sicily, Italy. Parents: Stefano Pirandello, who was a wealthy sulfur miner, and a mother, Caterina Ricci Gramito. Pirandello's childhood was privileged but marked by tragedy and trauma. His family's wealth came from sulfur mining, a volatile business plagued by political and economic turmoil. In 1885, when Luigi was 18, his father's mine collapsed financially due to falling sulfur prices and a fraudulent competition. The ensuing financial ruin devastated the family. Most traumatic was the kidnapping of his mother by a family enemy during this crisis. She developed a severe mental illness and was institutionalized for years. This personal tragedy profoundly shaped Pirandello's preoccupation with madness, identity, and a psychological crisis. He studied literature and philosophy at the University of Rome, earning his doctorate in 1891. Early academic focus on German philosophy and literature, influenced by Schopenhauer's pessimism, Nietzsche's existentialism, and the German idealist explorations of self and reality. Also translated major German works into Italian, notably those of Goethe and Nietzsche, helping bridge Italian and German intellectual traditions. Pirandello married Maria Antonetta Portolano in 1894. They had 3 children. Maria's later severe mental illness, which some sources suggest she was institutionalized, mirrored Pirandello's mother's condition, intensifying his exploration of madness in his writing. Personal experiences with the family instability and mental illness directly inspire his plays like Henry IV, where a man believes himself to be an insane emperor, and his other novellas like The Late Mattia Pascal, dealing with identity escape. Pirandello was known as a reserved but a deeply intellectual man, struggling with personal demons, yet maintaining a prolific literary output. Now let's analyze his literary career and works. Early work and style. Pirandello began as a novelist and a short story writer before achieving fame as a playwright. His early novels such as Il Fu Mattia Pascal 1904 introduce his key themes like identity fragmentation, the search for self, and the alienation from society. In Mattia Pascal, the protagonist fakes his death and tries to reinvent himself only to find a identity unstable and a social roles imprisoning. Now his major novels and short stories. Il Fu Mattia Pascal, that is The Late Mattia Pascal, explores the fluidity and elusiveness of personal identity. Mattia's escape from his past life and his inability to assume a new one reveals the constraints society imposes on the self. The next word, Uno Nessuno e Centomila, is 1, no one and 100,000, published in 1926. Deeply philosophical, this novel probes the multiplicity of the self. The protagonist realizes others see him differently from how he sees himself, fracturing his sense of a stable identity. The next work, La Patente, that is, The License, 1917, a short story illustrating society's tendency to ostracize and label those who deviate, touching on themes of madness and a societal judgment. Now let's analyze the theatre innovations. Pirandello revolutionized modern drama with his use of meta-theatre, plays about a place, and a self-reflectivity where characters confronted their own fictionality and the nature of theatrical illusion. 6 Characters in Search of an Author, 1921, is a landmark work in this regard. Unfinished characters invade a rehearsal, demanding their story be completed. This breaks the fourth wall and it challenges the boundaries between reality and fiction, author and character. The play highlights the uncertainty of truth and the fragmentation of identity, where characters represent a fractured self or incomplete human realities. Next work, Henry IV, published 1922, dramatizes madness and the blurred line between sanity and illusion, exploring the performance of identity and the social masks people wear. The next work, Right You Are, If You Think So, published 1917, deals with a conflicting subjective truths, suggesting that reality is ultimately unknowable and a contingent on perception. Now let's analyze the key themes we can see in Pirandello's work. Identity and a fragmentation. Pirandello's characters often face crises of identity, revealing the multiplicity and the instability of the self. He rejects fixed essential identities and portrays selfhood as fluid, contextual, and socially constructed. Next theme, reality versus illusion. His works blur the line between what is real and what is performance or appearance. Reality becomes a subjective construct influenced by perception and social roles. The next theme, the mask we wear. Inspired partly by Italian commedia dell'arte traditions, Pirandello's characters wear metaphorical masks, social roles that conceal true selves but are necessary for social interaction. Next theme, madness and sanity. Madness is a recurring motif, portrayed both as social alienation and a potential insight into deeper truths. His sympathetic depiction of madness challenges societal norms about a normality. The next theme, the role of the author or creator. Especially in the work like 6 Characters in Search of an Author, he examines the power and the limitations of the artist, exploring creation as a complex, unfinished process influenced by external forces. Next theme, subjective truth. Truth is not absolute, but it depends on perspective. Conflicting versions of reality coexist, challenging the audience to question certainties. Now let's analyze his literary style and techniques. Pirandello employed a realistic dialogue mixed with a philosophical and psychological depth, innovated non-linear narratives and their multiple perspectives, emphasizing the relativity of experience. He used symbolism and allegory sparingly but effectively to underline themes of identity and illusion. Often set his plays in everyday environments like small Sicilian towns or family homes to heighten the contrast between ordinary life and existential dilemmas. Now let's analyze the political and social context of his works. Pirandello lived during a period of profound social and political change in Italy, including World War I and the rise of fascism under Mussolini. Though not outwardly political in his art, his theme questions authoritarian impositions on identity and reality. His skepticism towards fixed social roles can be read as subtle critiques of fascist ideology's demand for conformity. He accepted some honorary appointments under Mussolini's regime, but maintained a distance from direct political engagement, focusing instead on human psychology and the tragedy of existence. Now let's talk about Pirandello's legacy and influence. Pirandello is widely regarded as the father of modern drama, a pioneer who influenced the later playwrights such as Samuel Beckett, Eugene Ionesco, and Harold Pinter, particularly within the theatre of the absurd. His exploration of fragmented identity anticipates postmodern and existentialist themes later seen in literature and philosophy. His plays remain staples of international theatre repertoires, studied for the profound insights into human psychology and an innovative theatrical form. Pirandello was awarded with the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1934, recognizing his contributions to revitalizing dramatic arts. Now let's talk about his honors and awards. Nobel Prize in Literature in 1934 for his bold and ingenious revival of dramatic and scenic art. He was knighted and honored by the Italian government for his cultural contributions. Now let's talk about some rare contributions and facts about Pirandello. Pirandello introduced the concept of the mask, not just as theatrical costume, but as a profound metaphor for human social existence, profoundly impacting 20th century thought on identity. Pirandello blurred boundaries between author, character, and audience, anticipating post-structuralist and deconstructionist critiques of authorship and meaning. His works were among the first to represent psychological fragmentation on stage, with such a complexity and depth preceding the formal development of psychological drama. Pirandello's private writings reveal his intense personal struggles with a mental illness and his family and his own bouts of depression. Despite the innovative style, he often remained rooted in Sicilian settings and culture, blending local tradition with the universal existential questions. Now let's talk about the present relevance of Pirandello as a writer and dramatist. Pirandello's exploration of the fluidity of identity resonates strongly in contemporary discussions on gender, performativity, and social roles. His skepticism about objective truth speaks to postmodern concerns about media, narrative construction, and fake news. In a globalized, fractured world, his ideas about a fragmented selves and multiple realities continue to inspire literature, psychology, and philosophy. Theatre practitioners still draw on his innovations to challenge audiences' perceptions and explore the boundary between reality and illusion. Now let's talk about his main works and the themes. First one, 6 characters in search of an author. The Italian title is Sei personaggi in Sera d'Autunno, published 1921. This groundbreaking play features 6 unfinished fictional characters who interrupt a rehearsal demanding their story be completed. It explores themes of identity, reality versus illusion, and the nature of theatrical creation. The characters embody fragmented selves seeking coherence, challenging the boundary between fiction and reality. The next work, the late Mattia Pascal, Il faut Mattia Pascal, published 1904. The novel tells the story of Mattia Pascal, who fakes his death to escape his unhappy life, only to find a freedom elusive and identity unstable. It explores themes of existential freedom, the fluidity of identity, and the constraints of social roles. Matthias attempts to reinvent himself, reveal the paradox of selfhood trapped within society's expectations. The next work, One, No One, and 100,000. Ono Nezuno e Centomila, published 1926. The protagonist, Vittingilo Moscada, realizes that everyone perceives him differently, fracturing his sense of a single unified identity. The novel delves into themes of self-perception, the multiplicity of the self, and the impossibility of knowing oneself fully. It questions the nature of reality as a subjective, fragmented experience. The next work, Henry IV, published 1922. And in this play, a man believes he is the medieval Emperor Henry IV after a fall, blurring madness and a performance. Themes include the nature of sanity, the roles people perform, and the fine line between reality and illusion. The play critically examines how identity is constructed through social masks and self-delusion. The next work, Right You Are If You Think So, published 1917. This play presents a conflicting testimonies about the truth behind a family mystery, emphasizing that reality depends on personal perception. It explores the relativity of truth and the subjective nature of reality. The characters' contradictory narratives highlight the elusiveness of certainty. The next work, The Rules of the Game, published in 1918. A dark comedy about a woman who plots to murder her unfaithful husband only for the situation to twist unexpectedly. Themes of deception, the mask people wear, and a complexity of human relationships are central. It reveals the irony and the cruelty hidden behind the social facades. The next work, The Giara, published in 1917. A short comedic play about a stubborn man and a broken jaw, symbolizing human stubbornness and folly. The jaw becomes a metaphor for rigid attitudes and the conflict between tradition and change. Through humor, it critiques social rigidity and the absurdity of inflexible pride. The next work, The New Colony, published in 1901. This early play depicts a utopian community that falls into dysfunction, highlighting the challenges of idealism. It deals with the themes of social organization, human nature, and the conflict between individual desires and communal ideals. Pirandello questions the possibility of true harmony in society. The next work, The Man with the Flower in His Mouth, 1923. A brief but intense one-act play in which a dying man talks with a cafe owner about life and death. Themes of mortality, the value of time, and existential awareness dominate the play. The flower in his mouth symbolizes his impending death, providing reflections on how life should be lived. The next work, Each in His Own Way, published 1917. The play dramatizes a conflict between a devoted mother and her daughter, exploring subjective realities and conflicting viewpoints. Themes include the relativity of truth and the complexities of human relationships. It highlights how personal narratives shape perception and behavior. The next work, The Mask and the Face, 1916. A tragicomic exploration of hypocrisy and deception within a family torn apart by passion and social convention. The mask symbolizes the false faces people present to society versus their inner selves. The play critiques the conflict between appearance and reality. The next work, The Consequences of Demand, is an unfinished work published posthumously. Pirandello's last unfinished play is a symbolic allegory about the conflict between art and reality, tradition and modernity. It dramatizes the struggle of artists to preserve creativity against a social indifference. The play is often interpreted as Pirandello's meditation on the fate of art in a changing world. The next work, The Other Son, published 1917, a family drama revealing the tensions between truth, loyalty and misunderstanding. Themes of subjective perception and conflicting truths permeate the narrative. It critiques social and familial hypocrisy. The next work, The Dead, 1908, a novel reflecting on death, loss and the fragility of memory. It explores how people cope with grief and the impermanence of life. The narrative intertwines personal and collective memories, questioning the stability of reality.